Father, Mother God, we give thanks for this opportunity to be open to the awareness of your presence. As we breathe in your love, your unconditional love into this moment. As we allow your unconditional love to move to all parts of our consciousness, bringing light to the darkness, bringing healing to the afflicted. In this awareness, we recognize, we know again, that we are your messengers here, now, in this moment, in this community. And we accept the responsibility for allowing your love to flow through us into this moment, to touch each and every one in this moment, unconditionally. And in this awareness, we are lifted. We are healed. And for this opportunity to practice your presence, we give thanks. And so it is that together we say, Amen. So, resistance is futile. You know where they came from? Yeah, Patrick does. Star Trek Next Generation, the board, right? As the board would approach a civilization and there was resistance, they would say, resistance is futile. That we will accept and integrate your uniqueness into our culture, but you will serve us. Well, okay, so I got celebratory with the rose petals. So resistance is all right, here we go. I'm going to get my cough drop. Excuse me. One moment, please. This is my premier or maximum allergy season. All right, so we have been talking about the process of transition. We've been using Robert Brumet's book, Finding Yourself in Transition, and we are in the process of finishing up this series, but we've talked about the ending, we've talked about the void, we spent a couple of weeks on the void, and we've spent a couple of weeks, counting this week, on the new beginning. One of the things that is remarkable about transitions is that it's a universal experience. We have transitions. We all have transitions, right? And how we approach those transitions are the way that we encounter the transition will determine the degree of pain that we have in going through them. Now, some transitions may be voluntary. Some transitions may be thrust upon us. But in the end, how we approach the transition is going to be key to our experience in the transition. Of course, that's the way it is in every aspect of life, right? How we approach it, how we respond to the events that are before us. The life of the caterpillar and butterfly is a perfect analogy of the transition process, or it's a good analogy, let me say that. Because the caterpillar, the old self does have an ending, and it moves into the cocoon in which the caterpillar is literally dissolved and it is restructured in the cocoon to emerge as the butterfly. So the cocoon is a good analogy of the void because it can feel very chaotic. It can feel like there is no evidence here in the void of how I'm going to continue in this process, right? But as we move into the new beginning, if we are conscious, if we are paying attention, when we move into the new beginning, it can truly be a new life, a new experience, something that is glorious and unexpected. So, how we handle this process is key to whether or not that new beginning really is that glorious opportunity that it promises to be. So, while we don't want to shortchange the void, we also don't want to linger there too long. Yet, it is a common experience for us to resist the new beginning because there is something familiar about the old and the void that leaving that familiarity can be scary. Robert Brumet, in Finding Yourself in Transition, offered us this, I think. Are we plugged in? Transmitter? Okay, thank you. Resistance is refusing to accept our present moment experience. Resistance occurs in the body primarily as tension and rigidity. It occurs in the mind in a variety of ways, such as judgment, anger, and fear. It may also appear in more subtle forms, such as rationalization, confusion, or denial. Some type of resistance is at the core of all compulsive and addictive behaviors. Something that I'd like to point out is that in the mind, in the mind, there are a variety of ways of experiencing this: judgment, anger, and fear. That is actually a key to the solution for the resistance that we may experience in the void, in coming into the new beginning. Robert also goes on to say that at a deeper level, we see that clinging to an outmoded identity or self-image can be a way of resisting the natural flow of life. Our self-image is primarily the product of our conditioning. From the moment of our birth, if not before, we are subjected to the promptings and expectations of our family and culture. They tell us, often non-verbally, who we are. And at that time, we have little choice but to believe them. But if we continue to cling to this programming from the past, we may be resisting the fullness of life as it seeks to express through us right now. How many of you experience yourself, your self-image, as right now? What is your age that you think of yourself as? For me, it's about 27, 28. Glenn threw up his hands like, what? So, my self-image right now, and I'm working on this, but my self-image right now is age 27 or 28. At the bingo sessions, I make a point of taking a shortcut back to the cashier's desk by jumping over the desk. Okay, that's my 27, 28-year-old mentality. When I consider what I can be doing, I think of myself as a 27 or 28-year-old. Mackenzie, who has no filters in what she says. She, she has said to me several times, pressing my arm, she says, "Grandpa, you're squishy." Well, okay. All right, so that tells me I need to get back to my exercise regimen. But there is within us this concept of who we are that is likely an age that is prior to now. So, if that's true, then what was it in that age that is ingrained in our consciousness? That is, I think of myself as 27 or 28, and I've had a whole lot of learning that has occurred, thank God, since the age of 27 or 28. But how is that self-image restricting me? How is that self-image keeping me from growing to the extent that I have grown and to the extent that I can grow? Hello. So, in chapter 10, he says, most of our resistance is unconscious. Simply willing oneself to surrender is rarely enough to overcome this deeper resistance. It is necessary to be mindful of each moment-by-moment experience, so that the subtle resistances can be consciously seen and released. Continuous practice of mindful awareness combined with an attitude of non-judgmental acceptance will eventually dissolve all resistance in consciousness. Our conditioned response to virtually every unpleasant experience is to tighten up and turn away. It takes insight and perseverance to retrain oneself to open up and allow each experience to occur as it naturally seeks to happen. As we consciously observe ourselves, observing our thoughts, feelings, words, and behaviors, we begin to see the deeper places within ourselves where we are holding, refusing to let go, refusing to surrender. Continued observation shows us that this holding Continued observation shows us that this holding is the cause of much suffering. Resistance to any painful experience will ultimately cause more suffering than the original pain itself. With this insight, we begin to let go, to surrender at ever deeper levels. For me, that is not the complete answer, but it is certainly key to moving forward and to healing our resistance to the present moment. The present moment is really the new beginning, right? It's always the new beginning. And if we're resistant to this present moment, new beginning, we are trying to live in the past. That is futile, right? We don't have that experience to live again. We have that experience to draw upon, but not to live again. So this process of resistance and its retarding of our moving forward, of gaining insight, of living the moment fully, is something that is really key to our spiritual growth. Being able to live in the moment. Spiritual teachers from all ages have said living in the present moment is the key. And living in the present moment is something that resistance keeps us from. So if we look then at my notes, which have disappeared, apparently my 10-minute timeout is not enough. So if we look at our, come on, there we go. Thank you very much. There is, in India, we know of this man named Gandhi. Gandhi was a lawyer in South Africa. And when he moved to South Africa to practice law. And while he was there, he was subject to the limitations, the impositions, the tragedies of apartheid. He was a dark-skinned individual, and that was not well regarded in South Africa. And his response to that time in South Africa, as we read in his autobiography, that response to the apartheid in South Africa was not as elevated as his response later on came to be. But when he went back to India, he found himself in the throes of leading a resistance to the occupation of the British Empire. And he was tempted, but he resisted the temptation to respond as he had responded in South Africa. Instead, he chose to take a nonviolent approach. When the British required that the harvesting of salt by the Indians be outlawed, because the British wanted to import salt to India. So they made harvesting salt illegal in India. I'm not sure how they could have expected to fulfill that or to uphold that law, but nonetheless, Gandhi was one of the instigators of teaching the Indians how to harvest their own salt. And in so doing, he became a target of the British Empire. Yet he persisted in his resistance to that disempowering law. And so it was that he was then in the throes of leading the resistance to the freedom of India from the British Empire. But he accomplished this, as we know, he accomplished this through nonviolence. And even though many in his close circle objected to that approach, it was nonetheless the most powerful means by which a country freed themselves from the oppression of an empire. So that's a great legend. But it was only because he was so focused on this approach of non-resistance to the imposition of the laws of the empire that he became a model for Martin Luther King and later leaders of our own civil rights movement to take a non-violent approach to the freedom of many people. So we look at Gandhi and we see his non-resistance, his resisting non-resistance, as a means of instructing us in our own transition experience. There is out of this concept of resistance, we see that it's a surrendering. It's not a giving up. It's not an abdication of responsibility, but rather it is let's just look. Whoops. To surrender fully is to be open in a deep way to each experience of our life. It means to allow ourselves to feel fully each response to the events and the circumstances of our life. It means to be totally oneself, to live fully in each moment. This requires letting go of our attachment to how we think we should be and to be unconditionally accepting of how we are right now. It requires a willingness to look at each part of ourselves as it arises moment by moment, denying nothing and condemning nothing. So the clue here is that to overcome our resistance is to surrender, but not by giving up, but rather by allowing God to be God. Let go, let God, right? It's a famous aphorism within unity. But that letting go and letting God is really about allowing unconditional love to be your experience in this moment. Unconditional love. When we practice unconditional love, when we give unconditional love to the moment, what happens is that our expectations of the moment are dissolved. And when our expectations are dissolved, that lets there be no foundation for judgment, no foundation for fear, no foundation for expectations of any sort. It is denying nothing and condemning nothing. It is about realizing that this moment, if we practice this unconditional love, this moment becomes a glorified moment. Every opportunity that we have to practice unconditional love is really a surrendering, is it not? It's allowing God to be God. It's allowing the moment to unfold. But it allows us at the same time to be fully aware and fully conscious of how to respond in this moment. And if we're fully conscious and being aware of the presence of God, because we are giving unconditional love, that is the presence of God, that's our experience of God, is unconditional love. And as we allow that unconditional love to be our experience in this moment, what happens is our fear dissolves, our expectations dissolve, our grievances no longer have a foundation, our judgments no longer have a foundation, and we are condemning nothing and we're denying nothing. We are just living fully in God. God is love, and he who lives in love lives in God. So this is the key to dissolving our resistance, is unconditional love to the moment, to be fully present, to be fully aware, and to be fully capable of responding as appropriate in the moment. In the Tao, it is written, the Tao of heaven does not strive, and yet it overcomes. It does not speak, and yet it is answered. It does not ask, yet it is supplied with all its needs. It seems at ease, and yet it follows a plan. While that may seem to be a paradox for those who want to control, it is nonetheless a prescription for life that has arisen in ancient times. 500 BCE in China? Probably not then. It was probably present in the annals of the sages prior to that time. Yet Lao Tzu was reputed to be the one who wrote the Tao Te Ching. And this way of living fully present, fully allowing God to be God, and being fully responsive to the needs of the moment allows us to let go of the resistance and to move into this new beginning fully present, appreciative of the opportunities that are in this moment, rather than hanging on to the past, hanging on to the void, hanging on to the old way of being. We move into this new way of being, in this new beginning, embraced and emanating unconditional love. A prescription for life. We'll have our meditation. As we come. as we settle into this moment, I'd like to share a story with you. But as a preamble to this story, let us just breathe in and breathe out. Allow ourselves, through our breath, to be fully aware of this moment. Breathing in, feeling that breath, feeling it fill your lungs, and feeling your body be vitalized by that fresh breath. And breathing out and allowing that which has served you so well to be no longer kept. Allow it to move on. Allow that to feed our plant friends. Breathing in and breathing out. Just be present with that as I share this story with you. Isaac was a poor rabbi living outside of Krakow. Lived in a one-room hut with a dirt floor. He is what we would call dirt poor. But he was a very pious man. He paid attention to the presence of God. And he honored his dreams as messages from God. And a recurring dream that he had was that he went to Prague. And he was marveling at all of the wonderful buildings and statuary and the living conditions in Prague, all of the wealthy and well-fed inhabitants. And while he was in Prague, he crossed a bridge across to a castle. And in front of the castle, he found a shovel. And he dug right there by the shovel. And he happened upon a chest filled with gold and gems. He was now a rich man. Well, this dream occurred several times. And when it occurred the third time, he decided that that was truly a message from God. So he picked up his shovel and he made the long trip to Prague. And sure enough, there were the buildings. There was the statuary. There was the finery of clothes worn by the inhabitants of Prague. And there was the bridge that he had seen in his dream. And he crossed over with shovel in hand. He saw the spot where he had dug in his dreams, and he dug and dug and dug. Alas, no chest, no treasure. Downtrodden and very depressed that he had wasted his time, there was a hand on his shoulder. And he turned around, and there was a young man dressed in the finery of the palace guards. And the guard said, "Old man, what are you doing?" And Isaac explained to him that he had this dream that happened several times, and it led him to this spot to dig for treasure. And the young soldier said, "You silly old man, that's what you get for relying upon dreams. I mean, I myself had a dream last night of an old man who lived in a single room hut. And he dug in the middle of his hut and he found a chest, gold and gems. You see, old man, you can't rely upon your dreams. But Isaac grabbed his shovel and he ran back across town. And he made the journey to home as fast as he could. And there in the middle of his hut, he dug and found a chest filled with gems, gold. Wow. I've lived all my life wanting to be free of this poverty. And I was living on top of this treasure. In your life right now, consider that where you are is the treasure. The gems, the gold that will change your life are right there before you to be merely uncovered, to be revealed. What a wonderful thing that this moment, where you are, holds the key to your richness, to your life, to the fullness of who you are to be. Right here, right now, we have within us that which will make us happy, that which will make us rich, that which will enliven our experience. Right here, right now, that treasure awaits your discovery. What are you willing to surrender to allow that treasure to reveal itself to you now? Breathing in, breathing out. We come back to this time and space, sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer. Together, please. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And once again, Trinity Damask and irreverence.